For almost 30 years, the idea of dinosaurs somehow being brought back and sharing the world with humans has captivated moviegoers. Jurassic Park struck fear into the audience, while The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3 kept us in love with its main characters. Jurassic World didn't reach the heights of the first film, but it still managed to reignite the world's love with this franchise, even if it was never gone in the first place. Fallen Kingdom, with a familiar story and a hard turn left when the road was all but supposed to go right, brought about maybe the lowest point of the franchise so far. Until this. Jurassic World Dominion is an absolute mess of a film, and there are 6 clear reasons why. Spoilers ahead. I'm going to tell you a synopsis of Jurassic World Dominion's story, and you listen for what's wrong with it. After supersized locusts appear on a family farm, Ellie Sattler and Dr. Alan Grant are led to a mega-corporation named Biosyn. When Owen Grady and Claire Dearing's adopted daughter Maisie is kidnapped and brought to Biosyn, they must go on an international adventure to find her. Ellie and Alan reunite with Ian Malcolm and eventually find and take in Maisie. Eventually, the two stories intertwine, the mega-corporation falls, and everything is happy. What was wrong there? Dinosaurs have absolutely no effect on the story. Sure, our characters may be walking and hear a footstep or a heavy breath behind them, and we're treated to another 5-minute chase from a dinosaur that inevitably goes nowhere, but that's it. They don't outright say it, but by having locusts be the glue that holds this plot together, they inadvertently make it crystal clear. This storyline about genetically modified locusts are the entire reason we get Ellie Sattler, Alan Grant, and Ian Malcolm back in the first place, and they're eventually the reason that the legacy and modern characters meet. Locusts. But that's not the only problem with getting these characters together again, and for the first time. The problem is, when Owen and Claire have to go on an international quest to find Maisie, there is no room to cram the 3 biggest characters in the franchise into that story without it feeling forced and crowded. And surprise, it feels forced and crowded. You have to create a just as big international quest for Sattler and Grant, and you have to find a way to get them with Ian Malcolm, and then you have to get them with Claire and Owen. To sum that up, a huge storyline can only intertwine with an equally huge one to not feel forced. And it still does. As they tell the primary story, they have to make the B story just as big. This is a fixable problem. However, when the stories only cross 2 hours into the film, it's simply too late to fix. Another unfixable problem with Dominion's story is its villain. Jurassic World had Vincent D'Onofrio's Vic Hoskins. Turns out he was trying to help. Fallen Kingdom had Eli Mills. He killed one of the main characters of the film, establishing a villainous presence. Dominion has Lewis Dodgson, who is apparently this same Dodgson, which makes no sense on its own.
Dodgson! Dodgson! We've got Dodgson here! See, nobody cares.
Lewis Dodgson beats up a chair and burns locusts. He has absolutely no depth as a character, and even though he's the villain, we're given no reason to hate him. Writers usually say, don't make a villain all evil. Hoskins and Mills weren't all evil, and Dodgson simply isn't evil at all. But he isn't good at all either. He's simply put, nothing. He does nothing to be the villain except run his company and use illegal measures to get Maisie to his lab. But Dodgson isn't even the worst villain in this movie. Sonoya Santos, I don't know how to say it. Yes, these are the only pictures I can find of her. Is the most one-dimensional character in the whole film. She shines lasers at people so raptors attack them. And then she disappears without a trace. She is simply only there to make us feel like our characters are in real danger, which they aren't, and make us feel like they aren't constantly protected by plot armor, which they are. Characters in this film are like coins. They flip with ease. Henry Wu has been established as a villainous presence, especially in the Jurassic World Netflix kids show Camp Cretaceous, where he is literally the big bad. But in Dominion, he saves the world from locusts and dinos. He also becomes likable when he shows pictures of Maisie's mob tour. Alright, I guess Camp Cretaceous isn't canon, because if he's a good guy, then obviously... Okay then. Ramsey Cole is a worker at the villainous corporation Biosyn, but then he is the cop-out that gets the characters out of situations at almost every turn. DeWanda Wise's Kayla Watts is a pilot for Biosyn who brings a kidnapped Maisie Lockwood and a kidnapped baby raptor to another country. And then she is a cop-out that gets our characters out of situations at almost every turn. Dominion is also needlessly repetitive. We've already seen Owen riding on a motorcycle with raptors. We've seen a T-Rex take on another dinosaur in the final fight as our main characters look on. We've seen a dark, rainy final battle. These are all examples of how Dominion's story is not only held together by tape, but thin, predictable, and lazy altogether. Dinosaurs have been what put butts into seats for 30 years. It's what was the main draw of the franchise. What happens when you bring back something extinct? What happens when you play God? This is the question answered in 1993. So how do you get 5 more movies out of this? Well, each film has its own problems, but Dominion's overarching flaw in this particular area is its absolute ignorance of that exact issue. Not only are we treated to oversized locusts, but also genetically modified and cloned human beings, along with megacorporations being corrupt and becoming involved in huge conspiracies and kidnapping mercenaries, leading to shootouts and explosions. This is a Jurassic film? Is this what Crichton wrote? Is this what Cope wrote? Is this what Spielberg intended when he stepped behind the camera? No, of course not, because it's not about the how. It never has been. It's not about the genetic modification of the dinosaurs, something the Jurassic World trilogy can't get enough of. It's not about how far you can go with these specific scientific principles and ideas. It's, simply put, the idea that you shouldn't try in the first place.
Done before.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Jurassic Park tried to say that we can't live in peace with dinosaurs. Creating a world in which humans and dinosaurs can peacefully coexist is impossible. One species, in this case being dinosaurs, will always have, well, dominion. No matter how much we want it or how hard we try, it is impossible. However, Jurassic World Dominion takes the idea of dominion and completely, in a surprising move, throws it away. It betrays Jurassic Park's central idea and attempts to flip it on its head. But in doing so, they also prove Jurassic Park right. We see the story try to convince us, but guess what? Even though it doesn't want us to really think about it, the dinosaurs are separated once again from the human world at the Biosyn remains. In its own attempt to show that we could live peacefully with dinosaurs, it cast them out almost just as much as they were on Isla Nublar and Sorna. The film treats John Hammond as a joke. His line at the end of Jurassic Park, when Grant tells him he's decided not to endorse the park, Hammond says, "So have I." This is brilliant. It's not that Hammond was wrong, what Jurassic World wants you to think, but it's the fact that he's right. Spielberg brilliantly has Hammond repeatedly say, "We spared no expense."
Spared no expense. And spared no expense. Yeah. We spared no expense.
Repeatedly enforce how overly cautious they have been with these dinosaurs. But the film still shows that when you play God, you get the consequence, something Jurassic World just doesn't understand. In Jurassic Park, the whole idea behind the park's downfall is the consequences. Dennis Nedry meets his end as a consequence of betraying John Hammond. Hammond himself puts his children into harm's way and ultimately causes them injuries and almost inevitable mental health issues as a consequence to bringing them to this park altogether. The lawyer loses his life as a consequence of partially but not entirely leaving the kids behind, but also being greedy, selfish, and money hungry. And ultimately, Jurassic Park meets its end because it tried to play God. And if that doesn't have consequences, then I don't know what does. In Dominion, Dodgson meets its end at the hands or mouths of a pack of Dilophosaurus as a consequence of setting a forest on fire. That's it. I've racked my brain, and that's pretty much the only consequence I can think of in this whole film. A man with a good 5 minutes of screen time, if that, dies. In the scene with the big dinosaur where the whole group is together, Ian decides to crawl into a car instead of running from the dinosaur just like everyone else. He then jumps out, lights a torch, and draws the dinosaur towards him. He intentionally puts himself into harm's way in order to help others. When I watched this, I became genuinely nervous and concerned for this character in a way I hadn't for the whole film. I thought, oh no, there's no way a character gets out of this without a single scratch. But that's exactly what happens. As the helicopter flies away after the final battle, if you could call it that, I remember thinking, where is the consequence? You just invaded $1 billion corporation, one that obviously isn't afraid to get their hands dirty, 2 veterans, a businesswoman, a genetic clone, a man who makes dinosaurs, and 3 scientists with a combined age of 198. are able to infiltrate it, complete their mission, and then escape while evading dozens of dinosaurs. Yeah, okay. Seeing Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, and Ian Malcolm back together again was great, even if they did get put through the 21st century blockbuster character formula first, including Ellie saying that Ian slid into her DMs, which has to be the worst line of 2022. None of them, especially Jeff Goldblum, have lost their touch and are able to slip right back into their original roles. This obviously provides a lot of great moments, but it also leads to a lot of unnecessary fan service. It isn't even good fan service, and it isn't meaningful in the slightest. Hearing bits and pieces of the Jurassic Park theme in the final battle isn't an homage or a sign of respect to that film, it's just flat out annoying that you won't just go all the way. The only actually quality fan service that actually shows respect to Jurassic Park, and this may be one of the only positives of the whole video, is the ending helicopter scene. Seeing our characters ride away to safety in a helicopter as the sun rises or sets is iconic. And the fact that they actually play that music is a welcome surprise. But altogether, in the grand scheme of things, the fan service in Dominion was rarely meaningful at best. Like I said before, seeing our legacy characters back was great. However, the big catch with their return is that there are simply cameos. What I see as a true return of a character that isn't a cameo is in plain view in a little film called Spider-Man No Way Home. In No Way Home, Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, return in triumphant fashion, but they serve a unique purpose in the story. Focus on the word unique. Honestly, do the big three have a true unique purpose in Dominion? Are they contributing something to the story that can't be contributed by someone else? What can they do to help that only they can? Why is a paleobotanist contacting a paleontologist about locusts and then going to see a mathematician who specializes in chaos theory about them? We can talk about the fact that they are there, but we really need to talk about the why, because as you can see, there isn't one. Their return doesn't make sense, even if it's great to see them back. It's unnecessary, they have no unique effect on the story, and they don't bring any sort of new, valuable information or skills to the table that a raptor trainer and former head of Jurassic World don't already possess. Therefore, again, as much as I love to see them back, we must face a harsh truth. Our final ride with these characters was not necessary in the slightest. When we look at a conclusion to a franchise, I can't help but think of Avengers Endgame. I hate to keep bringing up Marvel movies, but it is what it is when it's the best example. In Endgame, Iron Man dies, Black Widow dies, Cap lives out his dream future, Hulk continues his life as a blend of his two greatest assets, Thor leaves with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and if that doesn't seem like a conclusion, that's because it isn't, and Hawkeye gets to finally go home to his family again. Every character that we don't see again has their arc and story wrapped up in a nice bow, a perfect conclusion for each of them. In Dominion, there is not 1 ounce of conclusion or closure. Not only does it not feel like a conclusion, it doesn't behave like one either. What a conclusion doesn't do is set things up in the last 5 minutes. Dominion tells us that Grant, Sattler, and Malcolm are literally in Washington, D.C. to meet with the Supreme Court. That is a huge setup. Our modern characters get slight conclusions, but even theirs aren't really even conclusions. Just because a character's story in that film is over clearly doesn't mean that their story for the franchise is over as well. The dinosaurs are now on the same land as the humans. That isn't a conclusion. We thought that was the setup for this film, but clearly nothing changed from start to finish, circling back to the whole consequence thing. Jurassic World Dominion doesn't have a grasp on how to end a story to close out a franchise or how to say goodbye to these great characters. In fact, Jurassic World Dominion is a mess on its own. With a story held together by tape, the abolition of simplicity, the betrayal of a perfect idea, zero consequences, a lack of meaningful fan service, legacy cameos, and a horrible excuse for closure. Dominion all but betrays Jurassic Park in almost every way possible. Thanks for watching Country Age Productions. I'll see you next time.